every one of us to be wise. Do you believe that? That you have it within? Okay, so at least half of you. Let me ask again, how many of you know that you have it within you somewhere to be wise? Yeah. We truly have within us the capacity to be wise, what it means to be wise. This is the fourth week in a 12-week series this summer based on what is called the 12 Powers. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, really studied the life of Jesus as well as many other master teachers. He believed that Jesus embodied the Christ, that Jesus actualized his potential as each and every one of us are wired and created to do. He believed that's why Jesus said, "The things that I do, even ye shall do greater." And so Jesus became the Christ. Hinduism would call it the Atman. Buddha would call it the Buddha nature, but embodying all that we're meant to be. And so when Jesus called to him the 12 disciples, if you study the 12 disciples, each disciple embodied and personified a quality. And if you look at these, there are 12 different qualities which are aspects of our nature as a spiritual being human. And that it's not just something that our personality generates, but it's a soul quality. And so we began the first week with faith, and the disciple Peter was representing faith. And faith we talked about is spiritual assurance. What faith is the assurance of who we are as a spiritual being, always connected to source. And our beliefs and our confidence flow from that one thing, that it is spiritual assurance. The second week we talked about strength, and that in order to act on our faith, we need to be bold, we need to have strength, we need to have endurance and perseverance. And so that's sort of our spiritual capability, what enables us to stand and to be strong. Last week we talked about love. And the disciple John is the only disciple that Jesus called the beloved disciple. He's known as the apostle of love. Much of his writing was about the quality of love. And so what love is love is pure connection. If you love something, you must feel a connection to it. And if you really feel a connection and love someone, there is no way that you would seek to harm them. And so love is always calling us more deeper into our true nature. Because as we deepen in the awareness of our true nature, which is pure love, then I'm going to recognize that in you. And even if our beliefs are different, even if we look different, even if we vote differently, I will still be able to honor that you are the likeness and image of God, of love. And so the first two qualities, faith and strength, work together very closely. They're represented by Peter and Andrew, who are brothers. The next two qualities, love and wisdom, are also represented by two brothers. Love is John, wisdom is James. Jesus called them the sons of thunder, that love and wisdom work together. In the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha talks about in order to be enlightened, enlightenment must be bound on the wings. It's like the wings of a bird that must be balanced. One wing is wisdom, one wing is compassion. And so wisdom and compassion work together. Love informs wisdom. Otherwise, it's just something that's coming from the intellect. And so every week as we isolate one of these and look at it, it's sort of like looking at a part of the body to understand it, to really amplify it, to work with it. But at all times we're remembering that it still all works together. So all of these qualities work with each other. But at certain times in your life, you may need more faith, you may need more strength, you may need more love, or you may need more wisdom. How many of you have been in a situation where God knows you needed wisdom? Yeah. I remember teaching a class one time, and I wrote the first night, I said, my life would be much better if, and I asked people to fill in the blank. And the first woman got up and said, well, my life would be much better if I didn't have to deal with certain people. And people chuckled. The next person said, well, my life would be better if I didn't have so many problems to figure out. And everybody said, oh, yeah. The third person said, my life would be much better if God would just talk out loud. And everybody said, what she said. that wisdom, that we all want that wisdom guidance to know. And so when you think about wisdom, if you think of an individual that you believe embodies the quality of wisdom, what characteristics do you see? What does wisdom look like to you? A group of children were asked the question, "What is wisdom?" Rocky, age 9, said, "Wisdom is wearing a hat when you feed the seagulls." 9-year-old Carol said, "Wisdom is never ask for anything that costs more than $5 when your parents are filling out their taxes." Nicholas, age 11, said, "Wisdom is never bug a pregnant mother." Kelly, age 10, said, "Wisdom is don't be too full when dessert is served." And my favorite, Heather, a seasoned teenager, "What is wisdom? When your dad is mad and asks you, 'Do I look stupid?' do not answer him." That's wisdom. And so wisdom, even these children, when asked the question, "What is wisdom?" are speaking of something that they learn from experience. And so wisdom comes from experience. It's not merely intellectual knowledge. It's not a concept. It's personally experiencing something and being able to say what worked, what didn't work. It's able to self-reflect and evaluate in a spirit of openness that allows you to continue to grow and expand. And so that's what wisdom is for us. But just because you're old doesn't necessarily mean you are wise. You can grow older or grow wise. The only thing growing older guarantees is wrinkles eventually. But other than that, it doesn't necessarily guarantee wisdom. We ideally grow in wisdom, but wisdom can be found. Some of the most wise and profound things I have heard said has come from the mouth of a little child. There is wisdom in all places and always seeking to reach us and inform us as we are open to wisdom. In the Old Testament, the book of Proverbs is called the wisdom book because it's filled with wisdom sayings. One of my favorite is, "Interfering with someone else's quarrel as you pass by is like grabbing a stray dog by the ears." You get the message there. Don't step in or you'll get bitten or hurt. The word Proverbs talks about wisdom, and the Greek word for wisdom, anybody know? Sophia. Yeah. Sophia means wisdom. And so there is wisdom is personified in the female form. If you read the book of Proverbs, it's quite beautiful the way it's articulated. I want to share just a few with you to give you a real flavor for, at that time, what they were saying about wisdom or what wisdom was saying. "She is praised in exalted terms. All the things you may desire cannot compare with her, for she is a tree of life. Listen, wisdom is shouting in the streets. She is crying at the marketplace. She is calling out where the noisy crowds gather. She is everywhere. Wisdom says, 'Fools, how long will you love remaining ignorant? I have tried to help, but you refused to listen. I've offered my hand, but you turned away from me. You ignored my advice and refused to be corrected.'" There's a clue. Take advice and allow yourself to be corrected. Fools die because they refuse to follow wisdom. They are content to follow their foolish ways, and that will destroy. But those who listen to me will live in safety and comfort, and they will have nothing to fear. In Proverbs 8, wisdom is spoken about in a very cosmic way. "I have been established from everlasting," she sings, "from the beginning, before there was an earth. When God created, I was the architect at God's side. I was God's constant delight, rejoicing always in this presence." So wisdom, Sophia, is understood as being that which informs creation. And wisdom is praised, lastly from Proverbs chapter 3, "Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, and the one who gets understanding, for the gain from her is better than the gain from silver, and her profit is better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. Riches and honor belong to her. Her ways are pleasant in every way, and her paths are filled with peace." It's very beautiful. So wisdom, Sophia, is spoken of in the feminine It's personified as a feminine because wisdom is part of the feeling, intuitive nature. Every one of these disciples and every one of these powers is found somewhere in the body. Wisdom is found in the gut, the pit of the stomach. You know that gut feeling when you just know, or either you don't, or you know what you should do or you shouldn't? I've always said the best name for God, the most accurate name I believe, is something told me. That, have you ever done something and you thought, oh, something told me I should have taken that detour. Oh, something told me I should have never even gone out with that person, and now we're married. Something told me. It's like, I remember now, something told me that. But we override those. So wisdom requires us to be present with our whole being, to pay attention, to learn to be reflective, to notice. When can I tell? When does it feel like, yes, this is mine to do? When do I have that little feeling inside that says, I don't know, you probably shouldn't go there? And to learn to honor that. So that's how wisdom speaks to us in informing the intellect. In the disciple, as I mentioned, is James. James is referred to as the disciple of wisdom. Would you give me this slide? It's a little bit lengthy, but it's quite beautiful again, so I wanted to share this with you. This is what comes from James, known as James the Just. Do you want to be counted wise, to build a reputation for wisdom? Here's what you do. Live well, live wisely, live humbly. It is the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. Mean-spirited ambition isn't wisdom. Boasting that you are wise isn't wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom. Actually, it's the furthest thing from wisdom. But the wisdom that comes from heaven or from our spiritual nature is first of all pure and full of quiet gentleness. Then it is peace-loving and courteous. It allows discussion and is willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy and good deeds. It is wholehearted and straightforward and sincere. See, that's beautiful. That when we think of wisdom, it's one of the greatest qualities we could desire. And so how do we get wisdom? There's a wonderful story in the book titled The Beggar, the King, and the Secret of Happiness by Joel Ben Izzy. He's talking about a Sufi, a character from the Sufi tradition named Nasruddin. Nasruddin is known as the wise fool. And in this book he writes, Nasruddin is known as much for his wisdom as for his foolishness, and many are those who have sought out his teachings. One devotee tracked him down for many years before finding him in the marketplace, sitting atop a pile of banana peels, and no one knows why. Oh, great sage, Nasruddin, said the eager student, I must ask you the very important question, the answer to which all people seek. What is the secret to attaining happiness? Nasruddin thought for a time, and then he responded, the secret of happiness is good judgment. Ah, said the student, then how do we gain good judgment? Well, you gain good judgment through experience, said Nasruddin. Ah, and how do we gain experience? Well, through bad judgment, he said. It's like the comedian Jeff Foxworthy says, wisdom equals knowledge plus scars. that wisdom comes from experience. And so it does often involve being able to get some scars, to learn sometimes the hard way. But that's not the only way we have to learn if we allow compassion to inform wisdom as well. And so when we look at wisdom, it's to realize that it's not about knowing that or trying to avoid mistakes. None of us intentionally want to make a mistake. We all humans, all creation gravitate toward pleasure and away from pain. That's part of our very nature. And so seeking wisdom, we're naturally going to do the same things. But at times, things may be challenging, things may be painful, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's not ours to go through. But if we go through it with an open heart, allowing compassion to guide us, we can still grow in wisdom. Thomas Edison was acknowledged and honored for his many patents, his many discoveries. And someone asked him one time later in life, talking to Thomas Edison, they said, "You had so many failures. How did you ever succeed at anything?" And Thomas Edison said, "I never had failures. I did receive a lot of feedback along the way." And I love that because he didn't see it as a failure, but he realized everything is wisdom. Everything was feedback. That's pure wisdom speaking. When we realize that whatever is happening, that's feedback, telling us how to adjust course and proceed in the direction that we're choosing to go. So when we look at how do we begin to call forth wisdom in our life, the character in the Old Testament that was said to be the most wise person, the wisest king ever, do you know who that was? Solomon. Yeah, so King Solomon was referred to as the wisest king ever. So I want to read a little bit from 1 Kings and tell you a little bit about Solomon's story. It says, "The Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream. And God asked Solomon, 'What would you like for me to give to you?' Solomon answered, 'You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child.' Solomon was 12 years old when he became king when his father died. So this 12-year-old child is the one that is having this dream and saying this. 'I am only a little child, and I do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people that you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between what is right and wrong.' The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, 'Since you have asked for this, you did not ask for a long life or wealth, nor did you ask for the death of your enemies, but you asked for discernment and administering judgment, and I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never be another like you. Moreover, because you did not ask for these, I will also give you wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal king that is equal to you. And if you walk in obedience, I will give you a long life as well.' And so he woke up then from the dream. So he asked for wisdom. As a child, I remember hearing that preached about in the church I grew up in, and it really influenced me. I can remember praying for wisdom. And I even thought about it as a child, and I thought, well, that's pretty smart, because if you're really wise, then you would know how to do whatever you need to acquire what you need. You would know how to have the best life, a long life. And so seeking wisdom really is a wise thing to do, because whatever we need, if you have wisdom, then you'll have access to know how to bring those things into your life ideally. So shortly after this, the next story that takes place, this is truly in the Bible, but listen to it with soft ears, because, you'll understand why in a minute. So after he takes over and is appointed king, he has to make his first judgment. So what happens, the story is there are two women, they're both prostitutes, and they both have a baby boy. The boys are born 3 days apart. They're living in the same house. And during the night, one of the women accidentally rolls over on her baby, and the baby is killed. She realizes that her son is not living, so she goes over and exchanges it with the other baby. She puts the living baby in her bed. So when this mother wakes up and sees this baby is not living and recognizes it's not hers, she looks over and says, "What did you do? Why did you take my baby?" And this woman said, "That's not your baby, this is my baby." And so, of course, they start to argue and fight. And it escalates, and little King Solomon is called in to solve the problem. And so they ask him, "Whose baby is it?" This woman says it's hers. This woman says it's hers. And he says, "All right, bring a sword, and I'm going to cut the baby in half, and I'll give each of you a half." And one woman says, "Okay, that sounds fair." And the other woman says, No, don't harm a hair on the baby's head. Just give him to the other woman. I'd rather you do that. And little King Solomon said, love always guides wisdom. Love was able to reveal who the real mother was. So the baby was given back to the real mother. So it's a gruesome story that tells about wisdom and compassion. that if you look at it symbolically, it's about, the sword is about cutting through the chaos, cutting through the whatever you want to call it, cutting through whatever is there to get to the heart of it, to get to the truth of it, to let wisdom guide you. And wisdom is guided by compassion. That's why the two of them must work together. Otherwise, it's mere intellect. So if we look at this story about Solomon when he was 12, there are 4 things that we find in it that give us 4 practical ways that we can open ourselves to really bring forth more wisdom in our life. The first thing that little Solomon did was that he asked. And not only did he ask, in the dream, God said, ask me what you want. You know, if you read the scriptures, if you read any of the sacred texts, quite often they say ask. Ask and ye shall. Seek and ye shall. Knock and the door shall be. Ask, seek, knock. A-S-K, ask. But we tend to forget that. And so it's to remember to ask for wisdom. But quite often our human nature is to ask anybody else, or just to ignore all advice and directions and proceed boldly ahead, pretending like we know what to do. There's a great story. Somebody's alarm is now off. Okay. There's a great story that comes from the 1930s about a Native American tribe in Canada. The chief passed away, and his oldest son was appointed the new chief of the tribe. Well, his oldest son was a bit of an urban shaman, but the oldest son had really rejected the teachings of his father, the ways of his father. He did not learn about the Native American traditions. Now he finds himself with the regalia, and he's appointed as the chief of the tribe. He's kind of puffed up. He has a big ego. And so very shortly after he's appointed as the new chief, a group of the elder men come to him and they say, Chief, would you please tell us this winter, is it going to be a difficult, cold, long winter? And all of a sudden he thought, I have no idea. But he didn't want them to know that. So he said, wait just a moment. And he went back into his teepee. He was in there for a few minutes and he flipped a coin. Yes or no? Heads, yes. So he went back out. Yes, it's going to be a very cold, long winter. And so the men went and they began to cut trees and wood and really prepare for a long winter. But the fall rolled around, the winter months came around, and it was looking pretty mild. And so the wind bit back and said, Chief, are you sure? Is it going to be a long, hard winter? And the chief now is full of pride, and he's already made up the story. So he says, yes, it's going to be a long, hard winter. And so they go out and they cut more wood and they keep working. Well, the chief starts to think, they're probably going to come to me for other questions. I got to find a way to know this. So he changes his clothes, disguises himself, and he went to a college a few towns away. He found a meteorologist, and he said, can you tell me, is the winter this year supposed to be a tough winter? And the meteorologist said, yeah, we think so. He said, oh, thank God. He started walking out, and he said, well, wait a minute, how do you know? How do you figure out what the weather, how do you predict? And the meteorologist said, well, we don't really have the equipment. We honestly don't know. But here, the Native Americans are connected to a deep sense of wisdom. And this year, they have been chopping more wood than ever. And so we believe it's going to be a very hard, cold winter. I love that story because the tangled web we weave and the messes we create and the self-fulfilling prophecies we set into motion, all because we don't ask for wisdom. Or we forget that we have an internal guidance system. We were built with this guidance system. Right now within your body, there is an intelligence orchestrating the cells of your body, your heart, your nerves, your brain. Science can't even figure out or mimic the intelligence that is within our body. That same intelligence that guides the birds, the whales, all of creation, that intelligence is constantly seeking to inform us. So the first step is ask. Ask to be wise. The second thing that little Solomon did, he asked, and then he asked about what is mine to do. So often when we find ourselves needing direction or needing something, we approach it from the standpoint of, why did this happen? How can I get out of this? How can I do this? Why? when he asked, "What is mine to do?" If we realize that every encounter is a holy encounter, every challenge or opportunity has within it great opportunity for us to grow and evolve. And so if we begin to ask, what is mine to do? Guide me. What is my next step? Martin Luther King Jr. said, you don't have to see the whole staircase just one step at a time. I know in my own life when I've made big decisions, moving across from one area all the way to Hawaii, then all the way, Hawaii to Seattle. That was like sunlight to no sunlight. All of those things, you need guidance for those things. If you enter a relationship, if you leave a relationship, if you start a job, we need guidance for many different things. And so if you approach it by saying, what is mine to do? And allowing compassion to guide you. So the first is asking for wisdom and then asking, what is mine to do? The third really important piece is after he asked, what is mine to do? He was then saying, give me a discerning heart. He was saying, I want to be able to make these decisions. I want to have a discerning heart. In order to have a discerning heart, quite often requires a lot of unlearning. Because we grow up and we're enculturated, we're in family nated, we're in televated, we're all these things. And we're just a conglomeration of all of this stuff. And we respond to life as these things have equipped us to respond. It's like the funny story about the young married daughter who had come back to her mom's house for Thanksgiving and they're preparing to cook. And the daughter takes the ham and she cuts this end off and cuts that end off and puts it in the pot. And the mom says, why did you do that and waste that ham? And she said, well, Mom, you always did that growing up. And the daughter said, yeah, but it's only because I had a pot just that big. And that we put new things into old patterns because we're just following through. There's a true story that was in the paper back in 2008. A man named Christopher Raitt and his 7-year-old son were attending a Detroit Lions ball game. And during intermission, Christopher went to concessions and Christopher got himself a beer and he got a Mike's lemonade. He didn't know that it was alcoholic. This is when they hadn't been out long. So he goes back in and he's drinking the beer and his 7-year-old son, he thinks is drinking lemonade and he's chugging down a Mike's hard lemonade. So the security guard sees a child with an alcoholic beverage, walks over, finds out who the father is, takes them both up and out, calls the police. The father is arrested. They take them both to the hospital. The child is tested. They found no alcohol in his body. The father was a mess. The mom came in. They were just devastated. The police said, we're sorry. Because of this, we have to take your son into protective services. They took the son into protective services for 3 days. After that, he was then placed into a foster family. The court finally said, if the son can be released to the mother if the father moves out of the home. So the family quickly made arrangements. The father moves out and the son goes back. It was weeks. That's why it made the paper. It was weeks before the family was reconciled and a judge finally said, did anybody along the way stop and follow their heart? Did anybody really stop and look? And in questioning people, they were all saying, well, protocol says, the system says. And I'm not necessarily bucking a system. What I'm asking us to look at is our belief systems. Because systems and organizations do it, but they do it because people do it. Where and how in our own lives do challenges, opportunities, things come up, and we just run full speed ahead and we deal with it the way we've always dealt with it? You see, it's a discerning heart, the heart of a child that says, guide me, help me to show up, help me to do what's mine to do with compassion. What is the most loving, compassionate thing to do? So the first 3 steps, ask for wisdom. The second is ask what's mine to do in this situation, what's mine to know, to bring forth. The third is to be mindful to have a discerning heart. That requires us to slow down. I don't necessarily need to respond the way I've responded before. Let me slow down, ask for wisdom, and let me show up in a way that is most loving. The fourth step, Richard, if you want to get ready. The fourth step, what Solomon taught us as a 12-year-old child, is the intention to do what is in the highest and best interest of all. You see, wisdom calls us to look at, am I just identifying with my opinions, my observations, my desires, or do I have the capacity to be present to another person, another idea, another person to take into consideration? To truly have a wisdom in our life, we must operate from a place that is willing to do what is highest and best for all. That means sometimes being willing to have tough love. That means sometimes being willing to go against the grain of what is common or popular. That means sometimes being able to stop and take a deep breath and include that family member that you'd really prefer, what you'd rather prefer. But you just take a deep breath and you want to do what's wisest for them as well. Because even if you have to push to get there, to find that level of capacity and compassion in yourself, you realize that it's the only path to wisdom. That in doing that and honestly seeking to do what is highest and best for all, we open ourselves to wisdom, and wisdom always brings compassion. There's a true story about Alex Haley. Remember Alex Haley, the late author of the book Roots? He went from being, a nobody, so to speak, to a very successful man. And he was interviewed towards the end of his life, and he took them over and he showed a picture on his wall, and it was a picture of a turtle sitting on a fence post. And he said, "This has become my inspiration and my model for life." And he said, if you ever see a turtle on a fence post, you know it had help getting there. And he said, I keep that picture in my office to remind me, Alex, if you ever get too full of yourself, you had some help getting where you are. And he said, if I ever feel like, I do not want to take anybody else into consideration, Alex, you got to help other people along the way. And what a great motto to say that I want to do what's highest and best for all. That in order to get where we're seeking to go, that elevated place as a people, in order to have the kingdom of heaven, the qualities of heaven, as it is in earth, as it is in heaven, so it is on earth. I mean, do we really hear? As it is in heaven, so let it be on earth. It means everything that is possible in spirit, that which we call heavenly in nature, we're meant to bring it, anchor it right here. Wisdom is here to guide us in doing that. We're going to enter into a time of meditation where we anchor these further into our awareness with this beautiful song that says, Gentle Spirit. Gentle Spirit, flow in me. Gentle Spirit, grow in me. Gentle Spirit, show